Welcome to the Pat Sheranian Show. Thank you so much for joining us today. I have a real treat for you. I hope that you'll not only watch and listen, but that you'll notify your friends also, because we're going to be hearing some wonderful history about the Mormon Church and south of our border. So I want you to be sure and join us, and have your friends join too. I want to introduce my guest today, and then we'll go to commercial break and come back. This is President Fernando Gomez. Hello to you.
Hi, how are you?
Thank you for being here with me.
Thank you.
And we have a great big picture right in the middle of us here that we're going to be talking about. So stay with us for a few minutes and listen up to our commercial, and we will be right back.
Hi, this is Mary Louise Zeller. I'm an independent distributor with Kayani, and I've also achieved the rank of Blue Diamond inside of 3 years. I have a degree in biology. I have studied the research on our trio of products that Kayani refers to as the Triangle of Health. These three products work together synergistically and have more power in changing health. Many network marketing companies bring healthy products to market, some not so healthy, but many of them do. They've brought good products to market. This Triangle of Health product, Kayani Nitro Effects, our third product, is a life-changing product. It is backed by Nobel Prize-winning research. Nitric oxide is called the molecule of life. It's necessary for all cell function, the repair, the defense, the maintenance, and function of every cell in your body. It is responsible for whether or not you have cardiovascular health or cardiovascular disease. When you have sufficient levels of nitric oxide in your body, you will have cardiovascular health. That was proved by that Nobel Prize-winning research.
Are you an athlete looking for a natural boost to your workout? Have you studied up on the benefits of nitric oxide production to your performance? Then you'll want to try Kayani's Nitro Extreme. Nitro Extreme promotes cardiovascular health and improved blood flow, supports muscle contraction and relaxation, as well as nerve transmission. I use Nitro Extreme right before I lift weights, and I've never been stronger in my entire life. If you don't try Nitro Extreme, you'll never know what you're missing. Call 801-362-9552 to order yours today. That's 801-362-9552.
We're back. This is Pat Sheranian. My guest today is President Fernando Gomez. I feel so privileged to have him here with us today. And so I'm going to just ask about him personally. He's going to talk about this picture that is between us on the table, because this is a very special lady to his family and to you when you realize what has been created with her beginnings and where she started from and what has happened now. So President Gomez, let's first find out a little bit about who you are. I had the experience yesterday of meeting him in person and going through a wonderful museum. So let's hear the name of the museum, and then you tell me about you.
Okay, the museum is the Museum of Mormon Mexican History. And about me, well, thank you for having me on your show. I was born in Monterrey, Mexico in 1940. I was born in the church, so I grew up in the primary and in all of the organizations. And at that time, of course, we were taught all of the principles of the pioneers that journeyed from the east to the west here in the United States. But as I grew older, then I became more interested in other histories. But I grew up in Mexico until the age of 9. My parents then migrated to the state of Texas in the United States.
Okay.
And I graduated from high school there in Corpus Christi, Texas. And after that, I came to BYU and started my education in engineering. That was interrupted by a mission that I was called to serve in Mexico from 1962 to 1964.
And where did you go?
I worked between the city of Tijuana in Baja California all the way down to Tepic in Nayarit. It was a long mission.
That's a big mission.
But I did work in San Luis Rio Colorado, in Tijuana, in Culiacan, in Cananea, and in Mazatlan.
Oh.
So I had the opportunity of seeing all of that particular area of Mexico.
Beautiful. All right, so then after your mission, tell me about that.
Well, after my mission, I met my wife.
Best thing, she's here in the studio with us. And I just have to share this because a good wife makes sure her husband looks the very best. And just before we went on air, she came over and fixed his shirt a little bit. And I just love that. She's supporting him all the way, and I'm sure she's almost walked every mile with him since the mission, since she got married.
So that's the first miracle. We came we got married 3 months after I finished my mission, and we came to BYU to continue my education, and finally graduated in 1967. At that time, the church encouraged us as Mexican citizens to return to our country and help in developing the country and developing the church. So we went back to Mexico, and it was very difficult because employment was not paid as much as we would have liked. So we returned to Mesa, Arizona, and worked there for about 9 months before Motorola sent me back to Mexico. And so that was a lot better, and it was something that we had looked forward.
So you went employed by Motorola when you went back.
That's correct. So now we were expats, and we had benefits of being able to work in Mexico with benefits from U.S. companies.
Now, somewhere along the line, you had some children.
Yes, we had 2 children when we were still going to school. And our oldest one was born in 65, and then our next boy was born in 66. We returned to Mexico, like I was saying, and we worked in Nogales, Sonora.
Oh, okay.
Until 1975. And then at that time, the company that I was working for went broke. And so we went to the Philippines, and that became another great blessing for us. And we had presence in the Philippines for over 20 years.
Oh, my goodness. You do know the Philippines.
Yes. And while we were there, it was many, many blessings that we received in as far as our opportunity in employment, and finally ended up owning a factory in the Philippines that assemble all kinds of electronic components, and we hired up to 5,000-6,000 employees. So
my goodness!
It was really
you had a going concern.
It was a very fascinating, and it's another miracle story that I guess I don't know if we have time to tell, but at that time in the church, when we got to the Philippines, there was 1 stake and 1 mission, and when we left the Philippines, there was over 40 stakes and 12 missions.
Oh, my goodness.
So it was really a great growth, and I served there as part of the Quorum of 70s from 1985 to 1990. After a while, the church then started asking me if I could serve a mission back in Mexico. And so in 1992, we accepted a call to go to Mexico and served as president of the Mexican Merida Mission. And we were there from 1992 to 1995.
Your whole life has been about the church.
And then we returned back to the Philippines and closed up the business that we had there and retired. It was very difficult to continue because of the investment that was necessary, and technology in the electronic industry was changing very rapidly.
Very rapidly.
So then in 1997, we were called to serve in Santiago, Chile, in the Missionary Training Center, and we were there from 98 to 2000. We returned and got a surprise call from President Hinckley one morning, asking us to go back to Mexico to serve as president and matron of the Mexican Merida Temple.
Ah, what a great call.
So we were there until 2004. So that's our experience as far as life got started, and in marriage and children and the church and our work. And when we retired, then one of the times that we were called, we went down to Mexico to get reacquainted with family. And that's where this picture comes from.
All right.
Because this is my Aunt Consuelo, who kept very good diaries and pictures and letters and books. And my wife said, well, what do we do with all this material? And so we thought of a little idea. Let's put it together a museum so that this material can be exposed to the people here in Mexico. And it turned out to be something very different over the last 20 years.
And we're going to talk about that. May I take this down now?
Sure.
We can see a little better. Great, thank you. Because we've got other things we want to show you that are here today. I want to start right out and let folks know where you are and how they can reach you. So let's, you've mentioned the museum in Mexico. Mm-hmm. I'm going to segue very quickly to the fact that you now have a museum. We'll go back and fill it all in, but we have people coming and going on the radio, KHQN 1480 AM, and also on pat.utahvalleylive.com. And so let's let them know where the museum is here. It's at 1501, correct me if I'm wrong.
That's
1501
correct.
North Canyon Road, right here in Provo. In fact, it's almost across the street from, well, it is, from BYU property. It's next to the Pizza Hut, the whole building. And I had the privilege of going there yesterday. And I was calling this gentleman Fernando. What did I know that his background, this is why I'm calling him president today, because yesterday I learned of some of the positions that he has held and some of the magnificent work that both he and his wife have done, not only in Mexico, but here. And that's what we're going to be talking about when we go back to his aunt and how she inspired him, both of them, to do what they have done. But they're right in the large building at 1501. It's a large building, and just it's wonderful. You're open from 2 to 6 every day. You want to be there when he's there, so you can go through a tour. It will take you at least a half hour, 45 minutes. You want to see the dresses that his wife has brought in. Oh, my goodness, they're wonderful. I want to do a fashion show right there on the spot. So let's go back now and pick up where your aunt had all of these beautiful, wonderful scrapbooks, pictures of all kinds of things. And then we're going to work our way to what happened down in the museum in Mexico and then where you have gone from there, up here.
All right. Well, this is one of the books that she kept, and it is well recorded on with her own handwriting of different events that took place in the church in Mexico. And so
now, did she write about the primary and the different organizations?
Well,
or was it mostly Relief Society?
It was mostly the Sunday school, a priesthood meeting. Relief Society then got started eventually, because most branches, were very small at the beginning. But as they grew, then they started to adapt more and more of the program of the church.
Now, did you mention that there was a branch created before?
Oh, well.
Does she talk about that?
No, that happened in the 1800s.
Well, that was before.
That's right. That was
way
before.
Get me straightened out on this history.
Yes,
okay.
the first missionaries that reached my grandma and my aunt, my father, was in 1923. But the history of Mormonism in Mexico goes back way back into the 1830s, which is incredible, because over the last 2 or 3 years, as we have continued to digest and investigate history, we have found 152 Mexican printed newspapers that talk about Joseph and his visions, the Book of Mormon, the migration of the saints in the United States, missionary work worldwide, the temple ordinances were recorded. So it's an incredible history. But the first missionaries that went down to Mexico was in 1875, after Brigham Young had appointed Daniel W. Jones to translate the Book of Mormon into Spanish. And that's where this comes in. This is
such a treasure. I cannot believe that you took it out of the museum here locally in Provo to bring to us today. So we're going to tip it up. Kelly, can you get that? Yeah, she's got it. All right. Tell our listening and viewing audience, describe it, because our radio audience, of course, can't see them.
Okay, these are the first attempt to translate the Book of Mormon into Spanish. As you can see, there are 2 colors of covers on the Book of on this Book of Mormon, basically because they didn't have enough material to print it in one color. But it contains the initial attempt of Brigham Young to have the Book of Mormon ready for the first missionaries to go down to Mexico. And they took in their horses and donkeys about 500 of these books. And when they got to Mexico, they started to send them to prominent people all over Mexico. 2 of them, one was received by Altamirano, who was an Indian, and he had mastered Spanish at the age of 16. Before that, he couldn't speak Spanish. But he was impressed on what he read, and he wrote the church headquarters, John Taylor. And then there was another individual by the name of Plotino Constantino Rodacanati, who was by birth from Greece, but he had migrated to Mexico. And there's a long story as to when he learned about the Mormons back in Europe. But there is a poem that was written by him, and he signs it with his name, and then he signs the Mormon Eagle way before the missionaries got there. And when they started writing to the church headquarters, they received pamphlets back, and they started to read those pamphlets, and they printed 2 papers prior to the missionaries officially arriving in Mexico City. And they organized their first branch, of course, unauthorized.
Unauthorized.
So,
that was the story I remember. And I might add that these newspapers have been beautifully framed, and they're in Spanish, but
in English.
Printed the English, printed English over in sections so that you know the body and the meat of that newspaper article. And they have done a beautiful job of framing them, and they're on the walls, and you can just walk around the room. And when I saw the one man that was from Greece, I thought, now that's not a Mexican person, because it was an entirely different look. And so it was
Correct.
interesting to hear his history. And so I want to encourage you to visit the museum at 1501, a large building on Canyon Road in Provo, right across the street from Brigham Young University. It's open from 2 till 6 every day. Are you open Saturday?
Saturdays from 10 to 6.
From 10 to 6 on Saturdays. So good place to go. Spend an hour there, visit with President Gomez, and really learn of a wonderful history that I don't think is that well known. And that's why we're here today, because we want you to understand what really happened south of our border and how it came back and forth, who owned the land. So I'm going to get out of your way, and you keep going.
All right. Well, then when Moses Stetcher got there, he organized, baptized the first members in Mexico. Rodacanati was one of them, and he was called to be the first president of the branch there in Mexico City. After that, Moses Stetcher and also James Evelyn Stewart and Melitón González Trejo returned with the objective of translating the whole Book of Mormon into Spanish. And so by 1885, it was completed, and that was done in Logan, Utah. Okay. And so the work continued to grow in Mexico in the 1870s and into 1880s. By that time, the church in the United States had problems with the U.S. government on polygamy, so they sent the colonies down to Mexico in 1885 is when they started. And so that became another phase of the Mormons in Mexico. And the colonies, the people that went down to the state of Chihuahua and Sonora, they were very industrious people. They were self-reliant. And so because of those reasons, they were well accepted by the Mexican government.
Okay. Go ahead.
Porfirio Diaz welcomed them in Mexico City in the fairs where they brought their products to sell. And so they had a great rapport with President Diaz. In fact, when they went down there, he would meet with them personally, which was rather interesting. And so the work
happened today.
It couldn't happen today. So, but in those events, the mission was closed in 1890 because of the multiple problems that were associated both in Mexico and the United States.
Do you have any photographs that you want to show of the first group down there in Mexico, the stake, that one picture you had of all the stake? I don't know if you have. It was a large picture in the frame.
I don't think I brought that with me. This is a small copy.
I don't know if they can see it.
But I don't know if they can see it or not.
Take it out and see if you can get it, Kelly. But that was your first, that was a stake meeting, right?
Well, this was a conference that I will explain a little bit later, but it was held in 1946.
Oh, okay.
Okay. But let me relate another little episode. There was a Mexican fellow who was a world traveler, and he apparently was well educated and had enough understanding of life, and he came to Salt Lake City in 1884. He visited the tabernacle on a Sunday, and of course we all know what goes on a Sunday in the tabernacle. And so he was so impressed that on Monday morning he went and knocked on the door of the prophet. And the secretary came out and says, I want to see the prophet. And he said, well, do you have any business, any letter of recommendation? He said, no, I just want to see him. And an incredible thing happened. From 10 in the morning until past 3 in the afternoon, he would ask the questions and the prophet would answer back, something we couldn't do today.
No.
He was invited to eat lunch with them, and he describes all of this. And when he went back to Mexico, he printed all of his words that he had recorded on this particular event. And it's so impressive because he went back with an understanding that Mormons were really special people. I can't quote the whole thing because I don't know it all by memory, but definitely he mentioned that they were clean, moral, good parents, good husbands, educated, and so on and so forth. Just all the qualities that the gospel teaches us today that we should be teaching our children, our grandchildren.
I looked at those articles, and you've got them framed beautifully, and you've lifted it right out of the original document, translated it so we can read it. And if you really want to know, if you don't happen to be a member of the church or you want to feel good about the decision you've made to join the church, you want to go to this museum and read some of these writings because they're absolutely from the heart. I would say all the writings that I read are truly from the heart of the author. And I found it just a lovely, lovely hour to spend with you yesterday.
Thank you.
So the museum is located again at 1501 Canyon Road, North Canyon Road in Provo. Is there a phone number if somebody could call
we
you?
have
Okay.
801
Okay.
830
830
1468.
1468 if they have questions. And also we do have a chat room that you can join. If you're watching us on pat.utahvalleylive.com, there's a chat room under the picture, and you can send us a note. We'll be happy to have a comment. If you know President Gomez, please say hello to him. So, okay. Okay?
It is free of charge. We don't charge admission.
It is free. Thank you very much. His wife is sitting here prompting us, and we appreciate that. There is no charge. However, it is a nonprofit organization, keeps this going, the museum going, and any donations that you are impressed to share and give to this effort, then we certainly will, they would be happy to receive those. And we're going to be running some PSA commercials for you to that effect also, because, of course, museums don't make money generally. It costs a lot to keep things going, and so we'd like to keep this here. It's a valuable part of our community here in Utah Valley, and I think it's been a sleeper, and we need to get people down there and on their toes and read some of these wonderful things, particularly if you are of Mexican descent, but it's for anyone, for everyone, and they have translated, he and his wife and others have translated these newspapers so that we can read them in English. But how fun for somebody. Now, I know that last night you went to a meeting and met Mary Louise Zeller. I'm sure she spoke to you in Spanish.
Yes, she did. Yes.
And she loves doing that. So I know that the two of you had fun there.
Yes.
All right. Now, where are we along the line? We're still in the 1800s.
Well, let me just make another comment. Most of the international press worldwide was very negative to the church in that particular time. But it is very interesting that the Mexican editors, by the end of the 1880s, 1890s, were very positive toward the church. And I think that that's because of the example that was set down there by the people that accepted the gospel and the people that came down and organized the colonies down in the northern part of Mexico.
So they walked the talk, in other words. They lived their religion.
Yes.
And it was very impressive.
Yes, it was.
And that's, bring us up to date so I can ask that question about what's happening today. But we'll go and fill it in because it's the fill-in that is the history that's so interesting here.
Well, let me just take a moment here. The Mexican Museum that we have is located across the street from the Mormon Mexico City Temple. Just across the street.
City.
Yes. And we do have over 1,000 visitors every month down there.
Wonderful.
And it's something that we really cherish. We came up here to Provo because of three reasons. One is that there's a lot of Spanish-speaking people now in the area.
Yes.
Second, there is BYU that has a lot of students that either have served missions or will serve missions or are studying in Latin American studies or Spanish or something related to south of the border. So we feel that that will help. Okay. And thirdly is because we want to organize a board of directors that then both entities, the one in Mexico here, will be able to be perpetual and we can leave it as our legacy. So that's another important thing.
Have you started selecting people yet for your board of directors?
We have been very busy since we started trying to get everything organized.
That's right. You just opened.
Yes.
What, May?
Yes, in June.
In June?
In June, yes.
This year. Okay.
And we have made a couple of contacts, and we hope that at the first of the year we'll be able to move forward on that.
I have a neighbor that I know came down to Mexico to work with you there. So let's tell that little story because we all love Susan Easton Black. And she's just very dear to all of us, lives in our neighborhood, teaches our gospel doctrine class. And you wonder sometimes where the manual came from. She adds so much to it. She's got one of those wonderful minds. So tell the story about how you happened to know Susan and how she happened to go to Mexico.
Well, Susan Easton Black is well connected with Sister Liz Lemon Swindle.
Yes, they worked together.
They worked together, and several years ago that we were up in Salt Lake in a fair, and I met the son of this Sister Liz and talked to him a little bit because I was impressed with the paintings and decided that I would want to see if they would work with us. And they were very, very kind in providing 23 paintings of the life of Christ.
Is this Liz Lemon?
Liz Lemon.
Okay.
And then she went down when we opened the exhibit, and the exhibit was titled Mexican Pioneers Continue to Look Toward Christ. Oh. And we gave the life story of 14 different pioneers and their history and how they learned about the gospel and how their posterity was now progressing within the gospel. And we had tremendous success in having, I think we had over 500 people, descendants of those early pioneers.
Really?
When she was there. We had 2 firesides. So it was very nice. Then after that, I learned that Sister Black had written a book on Joseph Smith. So our next objective was to work with both Sister Black and Sister Swindle in getting Joseph Smith involved in the Mexican Museum. And by that time, we had started to look at the newspapers. So then we decided, well, this would be a perfect name. Joseph Smith, his influence in the Mexican press of the 1800s.
Great.
And so she went down and talked about the life of the prophet and opened the exhibit for us, which was very nice.
That's great. That's great.
And also we have a sculptor, Stan Watts, out of Salt Lake City, that has been very kind to us as well. And another donor that he refuses for me to tell his name, that has provided us with statues of Joseph Smith and Brigham Young.
Oh, wonderful. And those are in the museum in Mexico?
They're here. And also some in Mexico.
Oh, wait, I saw them.
Yes.
Yeah,
we have both here and in Mexico.
Oh, that's great.
So they're a very nice addition to our exhibit. So that brings us up to date as to where we are with respect to the museum.
He left out about 12 hours of history here, so I don't want you to leave all that out because we do have a full half hour yet to go, and so there's some wonderful stories that you shared yesterday, and I know you do have other photographs, so let's share enough that we really want people to come over and see this museum. If you're going to Mexico City, you can go to the temple, go across the street, and there's another museum. That was the first museum, and let's see, what is the next picture coming up then? We'll hold these up. Okay.
This one, I just want to make sure that we understand that the museum would like to honor and recognize the effort of thousands of missionaries that have come from the United States. This is a picture of Ray Lucero Pratt and also President Anderson, who were both mission presidents down in Mexico, and their wives. So the contribution that they made for the gospel to be able to take hold was very important. And so this shows a little bit of that.
For our radio audience, there are about, 12, 15 people in this particular picture. And again, they are who?
This is Ray Lucero Pratt and his wife, and President Lorenzo Anderson. Both of them were mission presidents down in Mexico, and some of the other sisters. So that's been. I think that people think that we're just talking about Mexicans. We're not. We're talking about the contribution of Anglo members that went down to help establish the church. And so we feel very honored. And in fact, in our museum on the outside, we have a picture of Orwell L. Pierce, Ray Lucero Pratt, M. Tenney, that depict that those are the gentlemen that helped establish the church in Mexico.
And in the beginning, it was very small, and then it grew and grew, and I was astounded when you told me how many members of the church are right in that area of Mexico.
Okay. Well,
there
are now over 12 million members in Mexico, and so it's incredible. But in 1901, the mission was reopened.
Okay, and they had closed it because of persecution
and
other problems. Right.
Yes. So in 1901, M. Tenney went down and started again. Now, mind you, for 10 years, the people that had been baptized, some of them were able to continue keeping their covenants that they had made with the Lord, and they kept some of the branches going. So when M. Tenney went down, he started to visit and walked around the country there and started to reactivate people. And so we started again to have more missionaries from the U.S. go down, and the work continued to grow. There was one missionary by the name of Andres Gonzalez, who was the first Mexican missionary that served a full 2 years down in Mexico. Okay. And that was in 1911 to 1913.
So that was the first. Well, now the missions somewhere along the line were 3 years. So was this a 3-year mission?
It was 2.5 years
2.5
for
years.
them.
Okay.
Yeah. At that time.
Okay.
And so that was important. And also in the following year, in 1917, there was the first Mexican missionary that served in the United States for 2 years. He was a full-time missionary.
From Mexico to the United States.
Yeah, he worked in Texas, and in that area of Texas in 1917 to 1920. Okay, his name was Abel Paez. Okay, so the problem with Mexico, and you know, there's many conditions in the world. World War I, the Mexican Revolution of 1910, the Depression in the early 1920s and 30s here in the United States that also hindered the work quite a bit. But when the revolution in Mexico took place, the missionaries were forced to leave the country because of what was going on. And so local members were then now called to preside over the branches. And he's really, you know, this is a gentleman that his name is Rafael Monroy. Okay. And he had been a member only a few months when this happened in 1913. The missionaries left in September. He was baptized in June. And so he was very interested in knowing what was going to happen. So he went to Mexico City and talked to President Pratt, and he ordained him an elder and the branch president of San Marcos Hidalgo branch in Mexico. And then for the next 2 or 3 years, he continued to keep the work going there. But unfortunately, the revolution caught up with him. And he became a martyr for the church and for the people that lived there in the area. He was taken prisoner, and they wanted to have the ammunition and rifles that he was supposedly hiding, which he didn't have. And they finally executed him. Oh. And so this was one of the many events of persecution. This one, of course, was related to the revolution. But there's other incidents that happened because of the fanaticism that was in the other religions that were in Mexico. And there was Brother Aquino was also killed in Mexico in the state of Puebla, because he was the branch president. He was shot and killed just as he was working his farm.
You know, we've grown up with the pioneer stories here in particularly coming into Utah. But I don't think that any of us realize how difficult it was. We think about Mexico now as so many members of the church, and And yes, maybe the economy isn't as good, but we don't realize what happened and the challenges that those early Mormons had, the members of the church and the missionaries. And now, as you're telling me, the leaders gave their life for what they believed, truly, and how difficult that has been. I'm so grateful you're bringing out this history so that we can understand some of the persecution that happened, and it continued happening for a number of years.
Yes.
And yet to have the church so established there now has really truly been a miracle in the works.
Well, you know, the church in Mexico went down 7 times before it stabilized. It was open, closed, open, closed, open, closed several times. And if you can imagine, there's another incident of a brother by the name of Agustin Aro, who had just been baptized, and 15 days later he was called as the branch president because of the revolution again.
My goodness.
And so, and he served for 20 years as branch president down there. So if you can imagine, without literature in Spanish, without really experience in the church, okay?
Did you not have scriptures?
Well,
They've been translated?
The Book of Mormon was translated in 1885,
Right.
but it was very limited editions.
Okay.
And so that was gone. 1920 was the next one. And by 1920, the Book of Mormon wasn't available. But Doctrine and Covenants did not came into Spanish until 1930.